So how are you supposed to make a decision when your heart is saying one thing, but your mind is saying another? Or your mind is saying one thing and your heart is saying another? Welcome back to Ask Dr. Syra. This is the show where I answer your questions about spirituality, psychology, relationships, just personal development in general. So the question of this week from Laura is, how do I make a decision when my heart is saying one thing, but my mind is saying another, or vice versa? So in order to answer this question, I want to talk to you a little bit about a principle that I learned, not a school principle, a principle, an idea that I learned from Dr. Chuck Spezzano. And so Chuck and many others in his line of work talk about the masculine principle and the feminine principle. And so what does that mean? So, and again, he didn't come up with this. This is more Carl Jung and his research, in case you want to dig in around there a little bit more. But the masculine principle is the part of us that craves structure and order, discipline, the part of us that knows how to move forward with our plans, knows how to goal set. So that's kind of the masculine aspect of who we are. Many times we connect the masculine aspect with the brain, right? So it's like my brain says one thing. Well, that's kind of the masculine aspect. Then there's the feminine aspect. So the feminine aspect is around spontaneity and creativity and rhythm and flow and friendship and, connection. That's what the feminine principle is about. And so we often talk about the heart as holding, that's what your heart wants. So when somebody says to me, my head is saying one thing and my heart is saying another thing, what that tells me is that there's a conflict between the kind of the more masculine, practical, logical side and the more kind of connected, intuitive side. And the thing is, we need both, right? People who are just all about the masculine and they're just walking through their life like boom, 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 and they have no kind of fun. They're not spontaneous, they're not creative, they're just like getting things done. And it's not a fulfilling life. And you probably also know people who are stuck in the feminine, who are just like, living the life, being in the flow, but I can't pay my bills and just floating around. Yeah, you don't want that either, right? There has to be that balance of both. And so if your mind is saying one thing and your heart is saying another, what I would say to you, Laura, is that it's not about as much about your heart and your mind. It's more about your own inner masculine side and feminine side. Now, whatever your gender is, it's not about that. Right? So you could be male, female, trans, non-binary, whatever, and you still have the masculine aspects and the feminine aspects. Maybe there's other words that are better, eventually we'll find better words. People have said like yin and yang, for example, right? The feminine and the masculine. There's another way of looking at it. So we have both. I would ask myself, which voice is stronger right now? Which voice is stronger? Is it the mind that's stronger with all the reasons and logic and examples of what to do next? Is that what's happening? Or is it just the feeling? One of the things we know about decision making is that 95% of your decision making already happens in the unconscious parts of your mind before you make that conscious decision. 95%. So a lot of what's influencing your decision making, you're not even aware of. You're not, whether it's your heart, your mind, it doesn't matter. You're actually not aware of all of these factors that are going in. And so when people say like, I just had a feeling, that's often coming from the unconscious part of the mind, right? And so, we once we learn to tune into that part of ourselves, it can be a really great barometer, compass to what my next steps might be. Of course, there's the old-fashioned way of like a pros and cons list. That's another thing you could do, is just kind of write it out, benefits. And I would also say a weighted pros and cons list. And I'll tell you what I mean. So say, for example, so we're going through something right now around moving houses, right? So there's pros to moving, there's cons to moving. The thing is, right now, there's a lot more cons on the list because there's nothing really wrong. We could stay here. It's no big deal. So there's a lot of kind of itemized cons. And each of those cons, I would say, would count for one. But the pro is a big pro. So the pro for us is quality of life and peace of mind. Now, I would give that like 50 rather than a 1 point versus like I know the routes. I know how to drive around and get myself places. That gets a 1. Quality of life gets a 50. So making sure when you do your pros and cons list, it's not just items, but you've actually thought about how important is each of these items, right? So that's another way to kind of work through for some people that find that really helpful. Pay attention to your dreams, pay attention to synchronicities, things that just seem to happen surprisingly, and see how that fits. One of the things I talk a lot to my clients about is like leaving it to the higher power. So I have something called a God box. And so you can replace the word God with whatever is comfortable for you, but the idea of there's this greater, grander source that's here for all of us that is the creator of all. And there are some things that are we just don't know, right? We don't have the foresight to know that if I make this decision, how will my life unfold? So sometimes you can just put something in the God box. Just drop it right in. And so I write a little piece of paper and I drop it into the God box because, I don't know what to do. So that's another idea of how to make some of these decisions between mind and heart. The other thing is, ask yourself, do you generally make your decisions based on your heart or your mind? And then challenge yourself to start including the other, right? So if you're generally someone who just follows your heart and does whatever you spontaneously feel like doing, maybe challenge yourself in actually looking at pros and cons or getting structure around it or asking yourself difficult questions about it. If you're someone who's always doing that, well, maybe think about what feels good right now? What do you want to do? What just feels natural to you? So that's another way to just really kind of focus and learn about how to do this decision making. And the thing that you shouldn't do, I would say, is talk to too many people. Because the more people you talk to about your problem, the more opinions that you will have. And depending on your relationship with each of those people, those opinions will be weighted differently and it can just make you crazy. So this is decision making as much as possible. Keep it an internal process as much as possible. Of course, you can ask for input and advice from elders and people who you respect their judgment. But I've learned to do a lot of that work on my own first and then reach out to 1 or 2 people for their perspective because I really value their point of view. When you're looking for those people, pick people who have the life you want. Pick people who you look up to and you think, wow, they've got something, rather than people who just maybe happen to be related to you or happen to be, in your neighborhood or whatever. People who actually have what you want. So those are my thoughts for you, Laura. Hopefully that's helpful to you and to our other viewers. Please feel free to leave me a question that you want me to talk about next time or your thoughts about the heart and the mind and how you make decisions. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel so that I can keep making these videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.